Hey there, this is the second video of an overview of the textbook chapter. Again, I'm using the 7th edition for this video. Page numbers may vary if your version is too far off of this one. Again, chapter 2 is all important. All of the content in chapter 2 is important. I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of it, guide you through, point out a few things, but you are responsible for all the content in it, and all the content in it will be helpful. Before that, let's talk about this. This is relevant. This is a stapler. It's called a long reach stapler. So you can use it to staple the corner of a page, just like any other stapler. That wasn't the corner, but anyway, that's not the point. But as a long reach stapler, you can also insert the paper, staple on the inside, and then you can do that to create a booklet like this. So this is what's called saddle stitch. It's got a staple on there and two staples actually, top and bottom, and then you fold it and now it has become a little booklet. So long reach staplers can do that for you. They fill up just like any other stapler. You kind of raise the top, and we know that because we've used staplers before, and so we know that you kind of lift up the top, and in here we expect to find, you guessed it, staples. And we know that we slide them in, scoot them to the front, and then hold your fingers away while you slam it back shut again, and then that is how you fill the stapler. I don't know if you knew that the second little part of the stapler, there's like the two inside, there's like the top little two things and the bottom two things. So the bottom one actually can make your staples go out like that, and then the front one does the normal way where the staples close in like that. I don't know why you want staples to fan out like that. I think that's because they're easier to take out later or something. But yeah, so most staplers actually have a little sliding thing that you can move to, to place something there. Hardest part of using a long reach stapler is figuring out where to put the staple, how far onto the page to put the staple so that it folds properly and is not like, a lopsided folded booklet if you put the staple too far to the edge. It's got to be in the exact middle. That's the hardest part of using a long reach stapler. So it has this little red slider, and it's got a ruler printed on the stapler itself. So therefore you can say, okay, my paper, this is a sheet of, these are 2 sheets of letter paper, 8.5 by 11 inches. So to position the staple at the midpoint, I need to move the little red slider thing to the 5.5 inch mark. So that's going to give me, put the line right at the center of the paper. So I adjust it here, there's 5.5 inches. And then now when I stick the paper in, it's going to bump right up against the edge of this little red thing. You do this down on a table, of course. I'm holding in midair. This would not work. But anyway, so you slide it down till it's just resting on the little red bar there. And then when you press the stapler, every staple is going to be in the same spot as long as this is in its place. So this is a stapler, and it's very low tech, but still has a couple of features to it. So in chapter 2, what we're starting to talk about in chapter 2 is exploring the human-computer interface. Okay, we call this a lot of times user interface design. Sometimes it's called user experience. Slight differences between those terms, but not relevant to us at this moment. Basically, the concept is, how do we interact with software? How do we interact with hardware devices? So by thinking about something relatively low tech first, like a stapler, it can kind of help to prepare us to talk about more complex topics. So chapter 2, let's do an overview and kind of talk about the highlights as you prepare to read the whole chapter and learn all of it, because it's all important. All right. So first concept, and this is on page 27 in this edition. The first concept is the concept of feedback, okay? So interface design is not for the faint of heart. It's not easy to make something that people can easily use. There's a lot of thinking that has to go into it. When we have our classroom activities focused on interface design, we'll talk about that in more detail, what happens when it goes badly and everything else. But the first concept is the concept of feedback. So when you are using a computer, you need to have something that tells you whether what you're doing is right or wrong. Has the computer heard my instruction? By heard meaning that it was entered in as an input and received by the computer. And is it doing something in response to my input? And then is it doing what I want it to do? Feedback. With a stapler, feedback is pretty much when you hear that little clicking sound that tells you that there's a staple coming out, and then obviously you can see that the staple is there. On a computer, there's feedback on a computer is often, we'll see now, like when you're going to a website and it takes a long time to load, and there'll be a little spinning thing. It says, loading or waiting or here I come. If you're on your phone and you are refreshing and you pull the screen down, you see a little wheel that turns. Those little wheels, all they are is they're really just GIFs. That's all they are. But it's a kind of feedback. So it's a GIF that shows you, I heard you, I'm doing something, okay? Otherwise, it's like talking to a person who's ignoring you. Like, hey, can you grab me a bottle of water? They didn't answer me. Did they ignore me? Are we out of water? Are they going to get it in a second? Meanwhile, I'm really thirsty. So the lack of feedback is just as frustrating in technology as it is in human relationships, okay? So feedback is important because it lets us know that the computer has heard what we want it to do, okay? And that it's doing something. When you see something that says done, or your status has been posted, or this comment has been deleted, anything that tells you that something has been done, that's an example of feedback. So when the user interface has been designed effectively, you will get feedback as a user. Very important concept. Again, the book does a great job of explaining it. Next concept for us to look at is at the bottom of that page, the bottom of page 27, the concept of a consistent interface, okay? So remember I mentioned that with this stapler, we know that because we've used staplers before, we know that you kind of lift this front up and that the staples are going to be inside here, okay? So this long reach stapler is taking advantage of the fact that this is what staples look like. That's familiar to us. We've seen them all over the place, and this is what they look like. So it's taking advantage of that instead of having some totally weird thing where like the staples go in some spiral or some weird thing that's not really familiar to us. Corollary in software is that we expect to find things in the same place across different software programs. Around 2007-ish, Microsoft came out with a new version of Microsoft Office. So I was at a place where I was volunteering, and they were like, hey Kim, we're having trouble printing. Can you help us print? And I was like, sure, I can help you print. I've been using Microsoft Word since I was like 8. I can help you print. So I go to the computer and I could not find the print button. So I looked for a while and kept looking, and it just wasn't where it normally was. Always, for the whole history of Microsoft Office, there was a file menu, and then when you click that file menu, it said print, and that's how you printed. But all of a sudden, in this version, Microsoft decided, you know what? We should move the print button. And so they moved it. And what you had to do is you had to click on the little round Windows logo. It's right up there in the corner. And you just had to click that. So you knew you had to click the logo. You know, once you figured it out, it's like, okay, I click the logo and then that's going to take me into the print menu. But Microsoft did not apply the concept of that consistent user interface. It was very different and it caused a lot of frustration. In subsequent versions, they ended up calling that the backstage area. So you knew that was like the backstage area where you could print, you could, you know, save, you could do all these things that used to be under the file menu, perfectly fine, minding their own business, right where they needed to be. So anyway, so in subsequent versions, they eventually brought back the word file, and it began to work more as it always had. So in the text here, concept of a consistent interface, a consistent user interface, is that you're using things that you have always used so that you can help your users to be familiar with what to do with your device. So that's what this is about. And when you're using the same company's products, you expect things to be a certain way. Apple, we've talked about with our iPhones. Apple has pushed us a little bit. You know, there used to be a button. There's no button anymore. You know, so they've done some things, but we've stuck with them because, you know, because we like Apple. We love Apple. So we like, okay, you can take our buttons away. I was actually kind of hot when the button left, but anyway, I got used to it. So yeah, so these radical changes to an interface, if you're going to make a radical change to an interface, it needs to be for good reason, and you need the person to, you know, you need to be able to communicate that to your users. So again, you guys are most likely not going to be actually developing hardware, developing software based on what most of your majors are. Some of you will. But all of you will be using it. All of you will be making decisions about which software to purchase, which hardware to purchase for your home use, community and volunteer use, and in your workplaces. So, you know, as you're making these decisions, you're going to be affected by the decisions that the software manufacturer works. When we think about the interface, we think about it as users. You know, what is it like when you go up to an app and the buttons are totally not where you think they should be? And we're also thinking about this in the concept of, well, what happens during that development process? What happens during the systems development life cycle that makes this, you know, that makes this easy to, you know, easy to follow or very hard to follow? So again, we'll have other class activities that focus on interface design, and so these concepts will come up. But that's the concept of the consistent user interface that's here in your textbook. Next, they present two methods of how people encounter new programs. So if I say to you, hey, here's this new device, and I want you to use this app on it, or here's this, you know, on your laptop, I need you to go to this website and accomplish some task on your website, or install this software on your laptop and do this thing. I'll pretty much say all of those before our class is over. So there's two concepts then: clicking around, blazing away. I'll let you read about it, but it's basically just different ways that people approach something new. Again, a consistent user interface makes this process easier, but that's what that explains at the bottom of 28. Those two methods of encountering a new software application. Okay, so the next parts talk about perfect reproduction, digital information. So digital and analog are the two different kinds. It explains this very well here. Basically, if something is digital, if you're making a digital copy of a photo, so I have a copy here, and I just actually save that same file to another device or another folder, that's completely identical. As opposed to if you had a shirt is analog, and this shirt, and then I printed, you made another shirt off the, the loom, whatever, then those shirts are technically not identical. They're not exactly the same thing. So, so in a digital world, your copies are identical. So that explains this process on those pages. So yeah, so digital versus analog, and then copying, and then the whole concept of copy, paste, and edit. A lot of this will be familiar to you, so read through that, enjoy the familiarity, and just make note of the main concepts there. All right. I'm at 15 minutes. I'm going to stop and make a second part of chapter 2.